Well, the Saints lost one key free agent today in Paulson Adebo as he goes to the New York Giants, but they don't lose one of their other top free agents in Chase Young, who is staying in New Orleans on a new 3-year deal. John Hendricks here of Athlon Sports and Second and Saints. We're coming to talk to you. Obviously, it's a very busy time across the NFL. The legal tampering period has produced a lot of chaos, frenzy. By the time we get to the new league year, when it actually starts on Wednesday at 3 o'clock Central Time, maybe there's going to be crickets, but I highly doubt it. But for New Orleans, kind of an interesting day, right? Like you start off Monday morning waking up, the Devon Godchaux news about him getting traded to the Saints, clearly giving the Saints defensive interior and the trenches some much needed attention. And now you saw Paulson Adebo going to the Giants. Good for him. Him getting paid, not really surprised. I thought that maybe in that 13 to $15 million range is where he would probably end up going off of like last year's numbers and such. But that's an unfortunate thing. And now the Saints will have to figure that out. And maybe a cornerback is a little bit higher up on their priorities as far as free agency goes and the draft. But when you look at Brandon Staley's 3-4 defense, and we got a chance to talk to a lot of the coaches today in just kind of this meet and greet type setting with the Saints had set up, and which is really good, really insightful. And, one of the things I actually got to talk to Jay Rogers, he's specifically over the edges. And right. So we talked about 3-4, 3-3, whatever the case may be. And Brandon Staley talking about, well, it's going to really be a matchup based attack. And so that could mean a variety of looks. We still expect nickel, all this other stuff that happens. But, the bottom line is Chase Young was one of the premier free agents that the Saints had that was going to hit the market. They originally signed him to this 1-year, $13 million deal. He obviously had some void years built in, all this, Loomis math, whatever you want to call it, however the Saints do it, that, just aggravates everybody else. But for the Saints, they had some time to work this out. They wanted him back. I mean, this was definitely one of the things. And Chase Young wanted to be back too. Like he's really liked his time in New Orleans. It was evident in the locker room. You talk to teammates, you talk to him. This is a good spot for him. And guys, y'all remember when they signed him last year, the next day was the neck procedure, right? And I think in a lot of ways, the Saints uncovered that, helped them get right, if you will. And look, Chase Young performed. And I know the sack totals aren't there, right? Like that's the thing, obviously, but 66 pressures last year, second straight year, he's above 15% of pressure rate or higher. That's pretty good. And he played in all 17 games. I mean, that's really good. So again, in a 3-4 defense, which is something that he's going to be able to play in, obviously going to be rushing the passer, all that other good stuff. I think that's a good foundational piece. And the thing is, he's only 25. So by the time next free agency goes around, he'll be 28. He can still get paid on the market, obviously, depending on what happens here in New Orleans. But again, a 3-year, $51 million deal for Chase Young with it's worth up to $57 million. So again, you look at the pass rush market, Myles Garrett getting paid, Max Crosby getting paid. I mean, this is just how it's going to go. And you look at how the Saints operate, and they don't really have all the funds, when you look at the surface, but they make it work. They find a way. And, Chase Young was absolutely one of the top priorities. That's something I wrote about and reported on after the combine, that they wanted Paulson Adebo and Chase Young back. Right. But sometimes the fallout, right? You just know, and we'll probably hear later that they did make some type of offer to Paulson Adebo, but it probably wasn't as good as the Giants. The same thing happened like to Malcolm Roach. They made an offer to him last year that just wasn't anything close to what the Broncos offered. I mean, so it's always a thing where it's a conversation. Yeah, we do want this guy back, but Chase Young, they're obviously a little bit more serious about him. And, that's a good thing. And the Saints have got to get better defensively. I pointed out earlier on the Davin Godchaux video that, the Saints 31st in run defense. You look at their sack production, just wasn't there. I mean, Brian Brzee was their leading sack guy at 7.5 sacks. I mean, it's got to get better, right? But I think when you look at the pieces defensively, and Kellen Moore touched on this today too, is just kind of having a real good mix on the defensive staff and offensive staff, just his overall coaching staff, of guys who can teach the game and good communicators. And you look at last year, what we learned about Todd Grantham is he wasn't teaching people clearly, right? Like Christian Boyd was kind of frustrated with his role. No Isaiah Foskey development. Cam Jordan obviously came out and said that nobody was teaching his stuff. And so it's just kind of really bizarre. Like Brian Young should have been the guy the whole time. But again, you always find out those things after the fact, and people say stuff after the fact. It's always how it works. But I think Chase Young can be very successful. So what does a successful season look like? Again, you use the pressure rates that he had, 66 pressures last year, second year above 15%. I'd like to see more finished plays. I think everybody does, because the goal is obviously that. But if he can keep the pressure rate up, I think the sack production will come. It's really going to be fascinating to see how the Brandon Staley's defense comes together. And again, there's so many parts and pieces that go into how this defense is going to work. I'm not saying that a 4-3 is simple by any means. I just think when you look at 3-4, 3-3, whether it's nickel, whatever your type of defense that you're playing, there are a lot of different creative looks. And on those edge rushers, especially, you definitely want some of those guys with speed, somebody who can get after the quarterback. We've seen some good things out of Chase Young. I mean, look, when he showed up at training camp, easily the best standout player, right? Like, I mean, we were ranting and raving. Those of us that were out in California could not stop talking about Chase Young. Now, we also, I know Ross and I were pretty fair about that, saying like, okay, maybe this isn't the Saints offensive line. Maybe it's something with that. But Chase Young kind of showed it during the season too. And again, you want consistency out of there. I think that's the biggest thing, is that you want to see finish plays, finish sacks, a little bit more, maybe consistency. But I could say the same thing about all the defense, right? Like when you finished almost dead last in the league in a lot of the statistical categories, everybody's got to play better, right? Like it's not just one person. And so I think Chase Young is going to have a huge hand in that. I'm curious to see what they do with Carl Granderson. He has experience. He could be that other end on the other side to play there. Where does Cam Jordan fit in that equation? The team also extended Nathan Shepard on a 1-year deal today. I mean, these are moves that probably aren't going to set the world on fire, but Chase Young's a big one. Trading for Godchaw is another big one too. And the thing is, Brandon Staley has said this, and so has Kellen Moore. And Mickey Loomis's philosophy is the same way. Build the trenches. That's where they need to go. The biggest thing on offense, left guard. Figure that out. On defense, figure out your guys who are going to be the big differences in stopping the run, getting after passer, getting off the football field, because I think that was also a big problem for this team last year, is getting off the field on third down. It had plenty of times where they had extended drives because of one thing or another, but Chase Young not hitting the market is a big deal for the Saints. And, a lot of people said nobody wants to play in New Orleans. Why would Chase Young want to stay in New Orleans? All this other stuff. Just things that I said before. Again, he had a very good experience here in New Orleans. He was happy here. He loved his teammates, and he got treated like he thought he should, right? And so I think that goes a long way for him. But again, this is just the start, right? We're just Monday. It's Monday evening, and look, there's going to be some sleepless nights here for a lot of us, including me. So anytime we got some news breaks down or news that happens, I'll be here to break it down. Ross and I will do it kind of a pre-free agency primer, if you will, but it's fun, but a good move for the Saints. And it's a younger piece, right? Like I know some people have said, oh, they just keep getting older. Why they sign these older people, all this other stuff. I understand that. But Chase Young is one of those guys. I think Carl Granderson can definitely take a leap this year. When you don't have such a great year, of course, you typically have everywhere to go but up. Everywhere you have to go up, right? And so I look forward to big things out of it. I think this is a big, good move for the Saints. I really like Chase Young. I think he can really make a difference on this team. Just got to finish a little bit, get those sack totals up. But interesting that it is worth up to $57 million. And this is a straight contract. This isn't like a performance thing or just a, per game bonus or anything like that. Like this is a legitimate contract for Chase Young, and for the Saints, it's a good move. And so now we'll see what they do on the cornerback position. That's another area that they're going to have to look at now that Paulson Adebo's out. Rico Payton, Kool-Aid McKinstry, Alontae Taylor, that's your secondary practically, the corner group right now. They got to upgrade at safety. They need a lot to make this work. I think they could have the potential linebackers to make this work. But I think you got to fix the edge, you got to fix the trenches, and then you got to shore up that back end, because right now it's a little bit concerning. And so it's going to be a process. It's going to take a village, but a lot of good movement in the right direction. Chase Young's just one of those pieces, and hopefully you can build around and build up with Chase Young being one of the guys who's going to see an extensive amount of playing time. We'll have plenty more to break down. Don't forget to check out all the written work on Athlon Sports. Link is below. Don't forget to hit the link and like and subscribe. The link is below too. Like and subscribe. Ross and I will be back soon to talk about all the hysteria. And don't forget to support him over at Locked On Saints and LouisianaSports.net. That'll do it for today. Maybe we might be back, but worst case, I'll be back tomorrow. So thanks so much for your time and tuning in. Y'all be good people.